Frostee Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Bleav Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
All right, Los Angeles, what's going on? Welcome back to the Bleav in LA Football podcast here on LAFBnetwork.com, also on the Bleav Podcast Network. I am Ryan Dyrud, co-host of the show with the great Frostee Rucker. Frost, what's going on, man?
What's going on? What's going on, LA?
Can't wait. Football is back. We are, a day away from an actual live game happening.
It's an absolute countdown at this point.
Yeah, it's
you know
great.
I mean? And I'm starting to get sweaty palms a little bit, and getting hype. Can't wait, I'm sure these guys are just ecstatic, with all this uncertainty going on, just getting out of training camp, who's there, who's not, but now they get to lock in.
Yeah,
Football's back.
Exactly. What's it like for you being a player now that's going to year 2 of retirement? Do you get that itch, wish you were out there, or are you at peace saying, you know what, I'm excited just to be able to be a fan now and watch this?
What's weird about it? Last year, I wasn't even that excited as I am now. Last year, I think I was mentally trying to prepare myself to, don't let it affect you. You'll get through it. This is your first time in 28 years at that point that I didn't play football in the fall. But this year, it's just the anticipation of not having sports for so long and, them getting to training camp and, starting this new venture on the LA Football podcast. It's helping me. And I want to play.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, I have 2 series left in me.
Well, you've been out in the field, with kids and stuff, so you're always around it, and I'm sure you got that itch again. But hopefully we can indulge that at least with watching and talking about it. So, we got a great show for you today. Rams fans, Rich Hammond, beat writer for The Athletic, is joining us to help us break down the Rams and Cowboys game on Sunday Night Football. So great insight there. He's been on the show before. Happy to have him back and get to meet Frost for the first time, both USC alum. So have that little connection. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, got to talk about my friends at Bet Online. As we mentioned, the wait's finally over. Football's finally back. And just because fans can't be there doesn't mean that you cannot bet on the game with our friends at Bet Online. So from game spreads, totals, to team and player and coaching prop bets are always fun. BetOnline gives you more options to wager than any place online. There's always the online casino if for some reason you don't want to bet on football. But we suggest you do that. So head over to betonline.ag today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Again, that's betonline.ag and sign up today. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, next up on the LA Football Podcast, excited to welcome back on Rich Hammond, who is the beat writer for the Rams for The Athletic. Does great work. Make sure to check him out. But Rich, thanks for coming back on. How you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. I'm excited. It feels like it's been years and years since we've seen NFL football. So to think that it's actually right around the corner is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped on it. I'm getting all these emails for fantasies and, everyone's getting going like, oh, you want to trade? And no, I don't. And this is great.
Back to normal.
Frost, do you do fantasy football now?
Well, this is my second year, but yeah, I'm in. I'm all in with the boys,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, Rich, last time we talked was after the draft, I Bleav. So it's good to have you back. And now we're literally days away. I mean, tomorrow is kickoff for the Texans and Chiefs, and then we got the Rams on Sunday Night Football. But first, specifically just kind of we talked to someone from the Chargers earlier, and I'm curious to get your thoughts too about these, roster cuts for the Rams. Off the top, was there any surprise cuts to you? I thought fairly kind of, I don't want to call it scripted, but we kind of expected most of what we saw. But anything surprise you at all?
Not particularly. The fact that they went so low on inside linebacker, I think, was a surprise to a lot of people. They only kept 3, and the 3 that they kept, none of them really are experienced NFL starters. So that surprised me a little bit. They did end up rectifying that a bit by making a signing a day later. So I think it informed us a little bit maybe about what Brandon Staley intends to do with that defense. Like, you can anticipate a lot of nickel. And I think we've seen that. They've got good depth in the secondary regardless. So that's not a surprise. But no, not a lot of surprises. None of the names that you really I remember one year, I remember in 2016, I had this whole feature planned around a linebacker named Akeem Ayers. He was one of the only veterans on the team, one of the only guys who'd ever been to deep in the playoffs. I had this whole feature plan, and he got cut on the last day. And I'm like, oh man, like I feel bad for him, but I'm just thinking, man, but none of those where you just go, wow, that came totally out of left field. I'm sure there was some pretty good competition down when you talk about the third or fourth spot on a depth chart, but nobody who you really thought like, wow, that guy could have been a starter, and now he's out of a job.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought too. And you mentioned the guy they brought on, Justin Hollins. They bring in from Denver, who, this is a different topic, but Von Miller now goes down for Denver, and they're probably real bummed that they let Justin Hollins go, because I think the Rams got a good one product out of Oregon. The only thing that kind of surprised me, and Rich, I don't know if you think this is a surprise at all, but keeping 10 offensive linemen, do you think that was due to the fact that obviously had a ton of injuries last year, so they were kind of like, let's just fortify the line by having as many guys as possible, or they just really liked the 10 guys they kept?
Yeah, probably a little bit of a combination. I mean, not having the offseason program, I think was, and this is not unique to the Rams, but not having that offseason program to really kind of test things out there. I think they're pretty secure at the 2 tackle spots and at center with Andrew Whitworth and Rob Havenstein on the right side, and then Austin Blythe in the middle. But you could see a little bit more competition, and I think you would have seen more competition during the offseason if it had been normal at those 2 guard positions. So keeping some of the guys that they did didn't surprise me. They're all guys that they like. They're pretty much all guys who have been through the program before, with the exception of the recent draft pick, Tremaine Ankrum. He's going to be a new addition, but the rest of those guys really have all been in the rotation before and know the system, have played well at different times in the system. So what it does is give them some options. There were some injuries last year that I think they probably hadn't adequately prepared for. So this does give them some good options in case you do have, unfortunately, some injuries early in the season. You have some guys backed up there who have some starting experience. So 10's a big number. I would have guessed 9. But it didn't really shock me, given how important it is going to be for that offensive line to play well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have the biggest job this season is keeping Goff upright, and so he can get the ball down the field. And last year, things were a little bit shaky that way, just because they didn't have the depth, like you said. So taking 10 makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it does. It's not. Hey, listen, if you're going to lean conservative in any way, I think you do it on the line, especially if those guys you've had and you like, because things didn't go well last year. Blame whatever, spin the wheel of blame. Injuries, inexperience, just not performing well. All those things factored in. So they've got to get that line right in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we even saw them adding guys mid-season to fortify because of all the injuries. So this will hopefully alleviate that. But Rich, I think the guy that we've been hearing the most chatter about, or excitement, if you will, is receiver Van Jefferson, out of Florida. What about him have you either seen or just heard when you've talked to people that has this team so fired up and this fan base so fired about him?
Yeah, first of all, I'll be honest with you guys. When they made the draft pick, I kind of thought, what are they doing here? Because, you use a very valuable pick, 2nd-round pick, on a receiver when you already have Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and Josh Reynolds, who they like. I mean, you had a pretty good group there already. And I'm going, wow, it feels a year early to go that high on a receiver. But then you start to see it. And then you hear about what he's doing. And the thing that's been really impressive there is he really fits. What the Rams like to do is they like to have their receivers have the ability to just play anywhere. And that's where Cooper Kupp really thrives. You can line him up anywhere. Robert Woods is more versatile than people give him credit for. He can do pretty much anything for you on the field. And Van Jefferson fits right like a glove into that mold. He's a guy who already you can put him outside and tell him to run down the field. You can put him in the slot and he'll fight for a good catch. And they're very impressed. And even if you guys saw, or anybody saw Hard Knocks, Jalen Ramsey coaching him up. And when you get a guy like that, when you get a top defensive back like that, taking some interest in you and seeing your potential and going, hey, I got to help you. I got to bring this out of you. I think that said as much as anything. So you know, when we last talked, I would have said it would be a big surprise for Van Jefferson to kind of have a role in this offense. Now I wouldn't be as surprised. Now I see him probably, if I had to say it, probably at the expense of Josh Reynolds, but maybe slotting in and getting some more reps even this season. I think the reviews have been that good. Now you got to do it once the games are live, but I think to this point he's checked all the boxes.
It seems like the teams just focus on, like we said, building the O-line, and like you said, they took the second-round pick at receiver. I think it's going to be a passing attack, and they're going to put it all on Goff. You know, with the big running backs gone, how do you feel about that? Do you think that it's a passing attack or still going to be balanced?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, they brought in an offensive coordinator now. I mean, Sean McVay kind of ran the show himself last year. I think probably to his detriment a little bit. I think bringing in an offensive coordinator was a good move. Sean will still always be the architect and the play caller and everything else, but just to have another set of eyes and you know, another voice in your ear sometimes, not a bad thing at all. So I'd expect you to see a little bit more versatility. Sean was so huge on 11 personnel, you know, throughout his tenure, and I think teams have started to adjust to that a little bit. You saw the Rams kind of readjust and use a little bit more 12 at the end of last year, and they found some success with that. Jared looked more comfortable in it. I thought they had a little bit more balance to their game, and the numbers bore it out too when you look at the stats over the second half of the season. So whether that means they go more 12 heavy, I don't know. I think that's probably the logical thing to think, but I think that's also what opponents are expecting. So I don't know whether they want to be that predictable. But yeah, ultimately Jared has to make the plays, and you know, say whatever you want about the offensive line. The interceptions were too high last year. Obviously pressure, you know, plays into that, but he's got to make better decisions with the ball, regardless of what's going on around him. And then they do have to figure out that run game. I mean, what was so huge about the Rams in 2017 and 2018 is you had Todd Gurley there, and he was just a threat. Even if he didn't touch the ball, he was still a threat. And they really got away from that last year for whatever reason, fill in the blank. So they've got to get a little bit of that back. Cam Akers is a guy they really like, another rookie who could step into a big role. I think that'll grow throughout the year. I think their reliance on him will get stronger and stronger. Early in the season, you might see a little bit more of that committee. They've got Malcolm Brown, who's a trusted veteran, probably less dynamic, but a guy who's been there and is more steady. So I think that'll evolve over the course of the year. But long answer to your question, yeah, I think it's really important to have that balance. That's what they had in those 2 years when they were really great. And to get back to that, I think will help everybody, most of all Jared Goff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, they keep 4 tight ends on the roster. So I don't know if that's tipping their hand of more 12 personnel or just the fact that they like what each of those guys brings. Obviously, one of them being a draft pick in Bryson Hopkins. But you touched on the running backs quickly, and Frost brought it up too, not having the big name guy there in Todd Gurley. So kind of 2-part question, and I don't know how much you know about the undrafted guy, but, you know, how is Cam Akers look? I feel like we haven't heard a ton about Cam Akers. Obviously, unfortunately, had that fumble in the scrimmage. But how has Akers looked? And then what do you know about Xavier Jones, the undrafted guy out of Southern Methodist, who kind of was a surprise make? You know, the Rams, I think, kept 4 undrafted free agents, if I'm not mistaken. So what can you tell us about him, and then how has Cam Akers looked?
Yeah, Xavier Jones, certainly one of the surprise guys. Wouldn't have bet on that, especially because he beats out a guy in John Kelly who had been around either active roster or practice squad for a couple of years. So that's definitely a surprise, and credit to Xavier for doing that. I don't know the exact role there. Again, it's hard without the preseason games. It's hard to kind of see who's contributing on special teams and things like that. A lot of times those final roster decisions really do come down to, you know, how versatile are you? Can you, you know, are you good on kickoff coverage, or, you know, what else can you do besides be the 4th string running back? So I would suspect there's probably something there, but I think he showed something. Whether he gets into the rotation, I don't know. That's probably a little bit of a stretch. Darrell Henderson is still been dealing with a hamstring injury, so were he, you know, to be unavailable in week 1 or even week 2, certainly there's a chance you definitely see Xavier, you know, dress out. I don't know whether he'd get on the field, but, you know, there's always a chance, right?
Of course.
So good for him. Yeah, Cam Akers, another one of those guys who you know they spent good capital on it, but really fitting in well. I think he's going to fit that style. He's not a Todd Gurley clone. It's not like they were looking to replace Todd Gurley, and I don't think you can expect to replace what he did in those 2 years. But very smart running back, former high school quarterback. Was a big wildcat guy. So, good vision, good understanding kind of blocking and how to read, being in kind of working relationship with that offensive line. I think there's a lot of potential there. And again, I think that's, people kind of read it wrong when they drafted him. People thought like, oh, they're giving up on Darrell Henderson. It means that they don't value. That's not how I read it. I think Darrell was always drafted kind of to be a complement. I don't want to pigeonhole him and say a third down back necessarily, but to fill that kind of role. And I think he was going to do that with Todd Gurley. And I think he's going to do that with Cam Akers. It's not a slap at Darrell Henderson. It's, that's the role that they think he can fill and thrive in. But again, just to reiterate, I think you'll probably see a little bit more even, split early in the season. But if Cam develops the way that they think he can, then you could see some pretty good production out of him.
Yeah, no, I like what they've kind of done there and built there. And Rich, kind of moving over to the defense quickly before we touch on the game with the Cowboys, which we're excited about, but keeping 5 safeties, obviously drafted 2 this year, keeping Nick Scott as well, who's just tremendous at special teams, had him on the show recently as well. So I think he's a good asset to him as well. But does that tell you anything about, I mean, obviously what they're trying, you mentioned it before, a heavy nickel. We'll probably see these guys in the field a lot, but how is Trell Burgess? How has Jordan Fuller's camp been? And do you expect to see them in a heavy rotation right from the onset?
Yeah, I think they'll get on the field. That's, I don't, again, you didn't know when they drafted them what the potential was there, but those are very versatile guys. I think Burgess could even slide over to the slot if they needed him. And I feel like you're going to see, again, we haven't had preseason games, so it's so tough, but everything we know about Brandon Staley, he's a Vic Fangio disciple, even from the stuff that he did back when he was at like John Carroll University and places like that. He is a multiple guy. The guys are going to be moving all over the place from snap to snap, from game to game. So I think he really found something that he likes in these 2 young safeties, and I'd expect to see them on the field. I mean, they've got a good starting tandem there in John Johnson and Taylor Rapp, but I don't think it's out of line to point out too that those guys have had some injury issues at times too. I mean, John Johnson, had a significant shoulder injury last year. Taylor Rapp was banged up a little bit last year and then banged up again in training camp. So obviously you don't hope for that, but you almost have to, you have to have a backup plan. Yeah. So it's good to have those guys. And then I'll give you my one hot take here for the session is you look a year down the line, guys, and what did they just do? They just spent a whole lot of money on Jalen Ramsey. And they're probably going to have to spend a whole lot of money on Cooper Kupp pretty soon. And there's another guy in that free agent class who's John Johnson. And if you're spending that much money on Cooper Kupp and on Jalen Ramsey, I don't know. Maybe you can get it done, but it makes it a little bit harder, I think, to think that John Johnson is going to re-sign. So then you look at these 2 young guys and you go, all right, if you can start to get them some experience this year, then maybe that pays off a year from now.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to look at the business side of it. And those 2 young guys are right in the right position to be able to take the lead at one point. Like you said earlier, these guys have been hurt and going into it with no preseason games or nothing like this. Soft tissues are going to be prone. Yeah. Hate to say it. Hope it doesn't happen, but you have to prepare for that. And the business side of it too will take care of itself.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how sorry, Rich, to cut you off. That's kind of how John Johnson got his role. I mean, he came drafted when they still had LaMarcus Joyner, had Tremaine Johnson, and then he kind of, after being drafted, kind of slid in and overtook them because they wanted big money too. So makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those soft Frostee, I agree. I was, you keep your fingers crossed every day. They managed to avoid pretty much, a lot of them during the training camp. But I hope week 1 goes well for these guys. I really do.
Yeah, I think that's across the league, though. A lot of positions have a lot just because they have to anticipate something happening, and they don't want to keep pulling guys off the street. They want guys right there that know the system, can plug and play. Next man up.
For sure.
Yeah, and the 16-man practice squad certainly helps that a little bit. So, well, speaking of week one, Cowboys come to town to SoFi. First of all, were you able to be one of the fortunate ones to see SoFi, or you haven't been yet?
I haven't been. I didn't go on this latest round because they were keeping the tours, but it's been. I've been there throughout, and it's the Rams aren't paying me to say this, but I'll tell you the one thing that is a takeaway for me. And talk about Dallas, like because I've been to Dallas's monster of a stadium, and it's very impressive. But I've actually gone and sat up in kind of the higher levels in Dallas, and you're far away. I remember sitting up there. Frostee was actually there for the USC Alabama game that year, whatever year that was in 2016, I think. And we don't want to talk about that one, probably.
Yeah.
But you were so far away that I ended up watching the video screen more than I watched the field because they had a better view, and I felt so disconnected from the field. And the contrast I'll draw here is I've been up to the highest levels of SoFi Stadium. It's massive. It's bigger than the Dallas stadium, but it doesn't feel as big. And I'm really excited for fans. Unfortunately, it won't be this week and might not even be this year, but I'm really excited for fans to get in there and just experience that because it's huge, but it's really going to be a good place to watch a game. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
I think Jerry was selling his TV. I think that's why.
It's impressive. It's really something to see that giant, the colossal board they have there. But it's almost distracting. And the Rams one is big, but it's a different, it's the kind of circular 360.
Like integrated almost, yeah.
Yeah. So it's big, but it's not something that's like, whoa, you're just staring at a huge screen TV. So I think they did a very nice job with it.
Yeah. One thing I noticed when I visited back in February when it was still like far away from completion was even though it's obviously your air conditioned, so it's going to be temperate controlled too, but with the clear roof, the way it was designed that even in your seats, it's not like the sun is blasting at you, even on the top level. Something that I noticed I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, that translucent kind of roof, and then they have the ability to open those panels too. So it's almost like a partially retractable roof, which is something unique. I don't know whether any stadium has done that before in partial. So even when you do get those rare, really hot days, that they still have the ability to cool it down a little bit. So it really is a marvel. So. I'm impressed.
No, amazing. Well, we would have technically had a preseason game last Sunday when it was 114 out here, so it would have been nice to be in there with the air conditioning. But looking,
the players lucked out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the Cowboys, though, Rich, some key matchups. Obviously, we talked about the Rams' offensive line a little bit earlier, but what are some matchups you're kind of looking for the Rams against the Cowboys for them to come out on top?
Well, it's a tough matchup. I mean, this is one that the Rams have encountered before. They've played the Cowboys quite a bit, even since they've come back to Los Angeles. There's a playoff game in there, and somehow they always end up on the schedule. So that Dallas, they've obviously had some coaching turnover. It's not the same staffs or anything like that, but a lot of the same players, a lot of the same challenges. So nothing particularly unique. I do look at that Rams defense just in the first game because. Again, we haven't seen it, and a lot of it is just the unknown. Those guys have obviously, gone through hours and hours of practices and walkthroughs and video sessions and everything that you can do to get yourself ready for live action. But it's going to be different, on Sunday when you're out there against Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott and Mari Cooper and what's usually a really good offensive line. Although I think they've had some injury issues there maybe, but their skill position players are going to test you. That's absolutely for sure. So just kind of, I'm looking at that Rams defense, the communication early on, that'll be very important. They're going to have a new signal caller, whoever it ends up being. I'm not even sure who's getting the voice in their head, probably Micah Kaiser. So that's a new guy to deal with all that. So just making sure you've got the screws tight, making sure that you are communicating well and all of that, because these guys are going to be doing it live for the very first time. I think there's a lot of potential there, but they need to tighten up. They can't let a guy like Zeke take over that game and start to dictate everything, because you don't want to get on you don't want to get on the wrong side of that. But the Rams know it. They've seen the Cowboys. They know the personnel really well. It's a good matchup. I think it'll be a really good game. And it's a great week 1 game, actually. I'm really excited about it.
Rich and Ryan, this is a question for both of you guys. If you're a betting man, do you put Jalen Ramsey on CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper?
Wow, that's a good question. I think week 1, I think you've got to go Amari. Just you don't know necessarily what you're going to get from the rookie. I mean, that's his first game too. The Rams have some options. I mean, I wouldn't sleep on a Troy Hill. I mean, he's a guy who played very well in the second half of last year once he took over as a starter. So he's been a little bit up and down, but I wouldn't feel bad or nervous at all about putting Troy on anybody really. But that's a good question. I think they'll move around a little bit more too. I mean, the Rams in the past, especially with Marcus Peters, I don't know whether there was the same kind of ability to move around a little bit. I think Marcus liked to lock in on one side a little bit more, which he's very good at. But I think there's a little bit more flexibility now. And there's even talk of like putting Jalen in the slot sometimes. I don't know whether they'd need to do that this week, but again, that's the versatility from week to week. But I think I'd go with Amari.
Yeah, I think so too. And who even knows if we'll see like Terrell Burgess, slot down and cover on these guys as well, especially in those nickel and dime packages. So, but I agree with you, Rich. I think if it was me, which I'm not doing that or calling the plays, but yeah, I'd have Jalen on their best guy, which right now is Amari. We'll see what CeeDee does this year. But Rich, kind of last one for me, and then Frostee, if you want to end it off with the final question. But looking at the Cowboys defensive line, obviously DeMarcus Lawrence is the big name. They got a great free agent in Everson Griffin. You guys know him well from USC. I was shocked he was on the free agent market as long as he was. Yeah. But how do you think this Rams offensive line will fare? We kind of already talked about it with some of the question marks, but obviously the staples at the tackles and center position. How do you think they'll do against this Cowboys defensive line?
Yeah, it's going to be a good test for that, especially for that interior. I think you feel pretty good about the outside. Andrew Whitworth's been doing this for, like 34 years now. So he's pretty, you know what you're going to get out of Andrew Whitworth. Rob Havenstein, I know people got kind of down on him last year, but something was just going on with that whole offensive line at the start of last year. I think there's a good chance he bounces back and does well. To me, it's about the interior, and you're talking about, Joe Noteboom, the guy who's coming off a very season-ending knee injury, getting into his first live action. It looks like Austin Corbett is going to start at right guard, which I don't think he played at all last year. I think he was primarily at left guard after he came over to the Rams. And then Austin Blythe at center, who was started half of the year last year, did pretty well after struggling at right guard. So when you talk about some of those guys that they have, there's the potential for them to cause some problems in the middle. So that's what I'm really looking at. I'm looking at Joe Noteboom, see how he's going to be able to hold up in his first game, and then to see how Austin Corbett does at right guard. But they've also got some pretty good anchors next to them too. Again, talking about Whitworth on one side and Havenstein on the other. So they've got guys who can help them out, but that's kind of the X factor for me.
Frost, anything else to add, or you're confident?
I feel like the biggest matchup of that game is going to be, both D lines versus the O line, and obviously you said Whitworth's a cornerstone on that offensive line. He should give them valuable, great reps and leadership. But I think it's going to be an all-day thing for him with Everson. I think Everson has something to prove. And I'm a big Whitworth fan. We were drafted same class with the Bengals. He was the second pick. I was the third. Big fan, great friend. I just feel like Everson Griffin is going to play with a chip on his shoulder. So I hope Big Whit's ready to go. So we're going to be locked in watching this matchup.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, and that Rams line struggled early in the season last year, even when they were kind of at full strength. So, I think there's a better awareness to it now. They do have a little bit more experience than they did last year, but you got to feel good about Whitworth being there. But certainly, again, it's a great matchup. I love the matchup. I love that it's week 1 and it's going to be in prime time for everybody to see. So looking forward to a great game.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll see if the Rams do run a little more 12 personnel and add an extra blocker there for Goff against that tough defensive line. But Rich Hammond, Rams beat writer for The Athletic. You're the man. Appreciate you as always. Thanks so much for coming on with us and giving us some great insight to this week.
Of course, guys. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Right on, Rich.
Stay healthy. We'll
Right
talk soon, okay?
All right, guys.
So, yeah, it's always good to get an in-depth look at what's going on with the team. Obviously, week 1's coming up. We're countdown. Can you believe it? We're countdown the time away from a kickoff tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Football
Can't wait.
is here. But it's good to get an in-depth look at, who they picked going forward, the depth chart, all those guys they kept.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So big thanks to Rich Hammond. Great guy, knows just former Trojan alum, so part of your Trojan family. So that's always fun to spread the wealth on that. But I'm super excited for this matchup. I think the Rams are going to definitely have their work cut out for them. Cowboys are kind of an early Super Bowl favorite. They seem to be like that every year, and then they kind of crap on themselves throughout the year. But they have a whole new coaching staff and Mike McCarthy, who's been there, done that before. So we'll see what they are able to do. But definitely a tough matchup, and I think the Rams can step up to the challenge, but they're going to have their work cut out for them for sure.
Yeah, week 1's here. It's going to be a tough one for the Rams, in my opinion. But it's good to have Rich on here to give us an in-depth look at the depth chart, how many guys they kept. The Rams didn't hit the injury bug going into week 1. I feel good about it. I think for both teams, there's going to be some soft tissue issues. I think injuries are going to play a part in this one, and how long guys can hold up. They missed valuable reps with preseason games, basically, with preseason games not happening. So now what, Rams got the work cut out for them. Dallas will be good. They'll be pumped up.
But yeah, it'll be fun to watch. So excited for that. But thank you everyone for tuning in to the Bleav in LA Football podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show. We are on every podcast platform you listen, also on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Frostee, where can everyone find you at?
You can find me at The Organic Frost, or you can email me at frosteepodcast@yahoo.com.
There you go. You can find me at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. Email is podcast@LAFBnetwork.com. We're going to be doing mailbag Mondays throughout the season. I didn't even talk to you about that, Frost, but it sounds like something we should do. So hopefully get your fan questions in about all of our 4 teams. I know UCLA and USC are not currently playing, but, still stuff to talk about, still questions to be answered. And then obviously Rams and Chargers as the season kicks off. So we'll be answering those. So thanks for tuning in, Rams fans. Enjoy the game. Sunday Night Football going to be a blast. Can't wait to chat with you throughout it, and we'll talk soon.
So you have the recap.